How's it going, guys? It's Nutshell here, and today we're showing off how I managed to actually complete the hustle event and the sorts of things that I learned so you guys don't have to make the same mistakes that I did when I was trying to get this event done. But before we start the video, if you do enjoy Escape from Tarkov content and you want to specifically see some PvE content as well as some of the PvP gameplay that we'll be doing later on the channel, then feel free to subscribe, as we'll be putting out content almost every single day and sometimes multiple times per day as we go through. Hopefully you'll enjoy. Let's get back into the full video. So first things first, what did I actually do to complete the event? Well, if you didn't watch yesterday's video, you'll see a very easy way to take out a lot of the external bosses that are actually in the game. So I highly recommend, if you want a specific method to do that and to take out enemies that are outside the actual resort themselves, the typical bosses that are going to be outside, then yesterday's video was going to be a very good one. I will link it at the end of this one. But how do you actually take out the guys that aren't just roaming outside all of the time? Well, that comes down to a couple of things. That comes down to the type of weapon that you're going to be using, because primarily you don't want to be using a night vision scope to go inside the building because it's just not that efficient, and you're going to find yourself ending up getting taken out quite easily, and it's just quite clunky to use night vision inside as the actual gun. So you need an actual normal gun, and in fact I ended up running with one of my friends on the actual game, and we ran in a bit of a group, eventually ending up in a 5-man group from just using the Tarkov PvE kind of server, or at least chat that you can use on the Discord server. So highly recommend, if you don't have anyone to play Tarkov with, to actually go in there if you want to make it just that little bit easier, although you will be sharing some of the boss kills in the game. But it is a useful way to guarantee at least maybe your survival out of the raids, rather than just getting taken out every time as you're making your way through 11 different bosses. And also the fact that you can then pushing into the resort much easier, and it's just going to make your experience much more pleasurable and not feel like you're just stressed out all of the time. So it is a way of doing it. It isn't how I did it throughout the entire time, but it was definitely an easier experience for sure, where we were able to take out multiple bosses every single raid, and pretty much guaranteed us to take out the ones that are internally in the building, as well as you clear through the bottom floors. Now, the area that we actually went in for the most part on pretty much all of the raids was going in through the west wing, in the hole in the fence, and once you go in through that fence, you can basically push into the wall that's kind of collapsed in, and then through there you can clear the first floor by just poking around the corners. And we used an MP153. It sounds stupid, but trust me, when you're using the MP153 you can melt bosses so easily that it genuinely feels really nice. But we were running with piranha ammo. If you can't actually get yourself piranha ammo for cheap, then you can buy it off the fleet. It is possible to buy it off the fleet, or get one of your friends to buy it from traders and then send it over to you. I usually run essentially the MP153 with an 8-shell mag. Now this, or an 8-shell barrel, 8-round barrel, whatever you want to call it, it's the tube. Anyway, the 8 rounds give you the possibility of essentially just mag dumping or shell dumping into the bosses, and often this is just going to basically either flinch them and they're going to miss a couple bullets to begin with, which are usually the killing blow when you're coming up against things like Tagilla, that sort of thing. So if you're pre-aiming a door and they come running through that door, they're pretty much dead almost every single time. There are instances where maybe you didn't quite pre-aim just enough and make sure that you're using audio, whether they are going to take you out, but for the most part I found it very easy to take out the bosses with the shotgun once you get inside of the resort. Obviously, when you do enter in through the west wing, you're going to find yourself up against some of the goons occasionally who are roaming outside. They will YOLO you. They do come after you when you are outside of the resort, looking over the rock, which I highly recommend doing before you push in, nading the right hand side of the building, nading the left hand side of the building. These are where the bosses will spawn, and especially the goons are kind of the worst thing about the entire start of the raid. Once you're inside the building, it's pretty self-explanatory, just clearing corners and working your way upstairs into the second floor, at which point I will beeline it once I've killed all of the bosses inside of that area of the map, or at least the building. I will then move into the east wing of the actual building by just running and sprinting through the corridor on the actual map. So second floor going across is going to be quite easy for you to actually get across. The only thing that you do have to be careful of is obviously bosses spawn outside of the building. So when they do spawn outside, they are going to lock onto you as you're running across. And as soon as you hear any voice lines, I would recommend just diving onto the floor. Obviously clear the kind of area in front of you. You want to make sure that there's no one there. But usually by this time you've picked up an actual AR from one of the bosses that you've taken out, and then you can just basically use that to begin with and then swap to your shotgun once you do cross the bridge as you're kind of cleared the area in front of you. One of the biggest things is of course making sure that you do have enough ammo. Usually you're taking about 80 rounds of Piranha. It's actually very cheap. In total it probably costs you about 80k. Very much a cheaper way of doing it than taking in mags of, you know, PS and stuff like that. It is still cheaper than doing that, considering you don't need mags with a shotgun and you can pack the rounds really quickly. You can pack them whilst you're actually running with the shotgun, and it's something I'll do if I don't end up killing the boss instantly, is just run to another doorway, just going zigzagging through the doors, making sure to go in through some of the doors that lead further down the hallways and kind of clearing those rooms as we go. You can of course then peek corners and doors just very quickly, see if there's any bosses. Hopefully they'll aggro you and push towards you. When they do that, it's basically just free damage that you can just pull around and just shoot them in the head as much as possible. Things like Killer and Tagilla can be pumped with this, so don't worry, the ammo will actually deal damage to them regardless of their actual armor that they have over. You just want to aim at thorax when you are taking out things like Tagilla and Killer. It really does melt them, even though you might not expect it to. Just make sure that you're somewhat close. We ran it with basically the setup build that I normally would run when doing the quest setup. And essentially it's the same shotgun, so that is what we used. It's really effective against the bosses. Even things like Rashala, any of these, they're so easy to kill. They just feel like you're playing up against PMCs. Just make sure that you don't stand out for too long. If you miss the first 3 and you can see that they're starting to look at you, if they're stood still, make sure you just pull back. It doesn't matter if you've got more in the actual chamber, just make sure to pull away. Trust me, the amount of times where I stayed way too long after missing, or maybe missing the first few, where you're not flinching the boss, yeah, it ends up in a catastrophe and they'll just auto lock your head and you're gone from the raid. So just be aware of that. Obviously use the best armor, gear, stuff like that you can, but this strategy really did work very well for me. And obviously if you've got friends, you can basically cover each other's angles and cover any of the kind of the doors that are coming from behind you. I really do recommend jumping into the Tarkov PvE kind of lobbies that are on the Discord, official Discord. I will leave a link down in the description that you can go to the Discord and just jump in with a couple of randoms. And yeah, it's been a very pleasant experience for me, as everyone's just trying to get the task done. And it just saves yourself some time, gear, and of course you can actually get out with some of the gear as well. The one kind of pet peeve and one of the things I hated about this whole event is the actual timer of the raid. The raid timers on PvE are already something that is very annoying because they're much lower than in the actual PvP mode, which leads to you basically struggling to get out. You have to leave it about 4 minutes unless the car's there. And most of the time you're going to struggle to actually get out, even when you leave with plenty of time, because you're loaded up or whatever, and it's quite heavy when it's pulling out people's guns and all of the armors and rigs that you can get from all of the bosses. So yeah, just make sure that you do take yourself some stims, things like mules, that are going to allow you to just keep on running. Yeah, this is one of the biggest things that I would recommend, and if I was doing it again, is something I would do. Now, if you're playing purely solo, just make sure that if you take out a few bosses and you're starting to feel pressured with time or clearing places, you can often just leave and go and reset. Saves you the gear and that sort of stuff, and then you can go back in. If you don't meet the bosses, often pushing into the east wing is where the mistakes start to happen. The west wing is quite easy because you're kind of already there. You know that you've probably killed a boss or two before you've even entered in, or at least the very beginning of entering in, so there's only going to be a few more in that actual area, if any. So yeah, just make sure that you get out if you do feel like you're not going to be able to push in, or if you don't care about actually losing your gear, just YOLO on down. And yeah, that really worked out for me, and I found that it was much easier once you do use the shotgun on the daytime to take out the guys that are inside. This is something that I did, and it just made things a hell of a lot easier. But taking out the guys outside, things like Tagilla, Killer, they're really easy to do if you're using the night vision. It's going to save you a ton of time. And then swap to the shotgun to take out most of the guys that are inside, Rashala, Sanitar, and things like a Kalonte. That was the last boss that we needed to do, and eventually we did actually do it. But hopefully this video gives you an indication of the sort of stuff that I did, as well as some of the footage from when I was doing it. And yeah, really enjoyed this event. I thought it was great, and I'm glad to not have to keep doing it, but I probably will anyway, just because it's a ton of fun. But other than that, if you've got any questions, make sure to leave them in the comment section down below, as I'll try my best to answer everything. And of course, like the video if you did. Once again, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more Escape from Tarkov content on this YouTube channel that we've recently started. But other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.